So just a brief overview of my presentation and what I'll be going through today. I'm going to go over the learning styles and just talk briefly about what they are, what they're used for, as well as Bloom's taxonomy and kind of what that is and what the purpose of that is. Then I'll share a few resources, so some online class taking tips with regard to, us being on Zoom and taking classes, as well as a few resources. So maybe some people to reach out to and some different resources that might help you with your studying in Zoom classes. So before we begin, I kind of want to, since this is related to study skills and the different tactics, I kind of want to gauge where you all are in your studying skills and tactics. So I just kind of want to, I'm not going to go through all of these for time's sake, but just kind of want to see where you all are in your studying. So just let me know, like, as far as setting your goals, if you sometimes do it, usually do it, never do it, always do it, things like that. I'm going to go through that, and I just kind of want to hear from you all. So we'll start with the first one. So I set study goals for myself. So where are you with that? Who all set study goals for themselves?
I do.
Okay, how often?
Pretty much all the time. I try to set like a goal for the night, just so I'm not trying to do everything last minute.
Okay, so you be always, got you. All right, anybody else?
I try. Don't always accomplish the ones I set because things come up.
Okay, that's understandable. You got your foot right in the door, though. You have it sometimes. All right, anyone else? Okay, so what about having a designated study space? How often do you all do that?
Always.
Always, okay.
Always.
All right, cool. So we got a few always. Okay, what about using a planner?
Always. When I remember to, but yeah, mostly always.
Okay, so we're always using a planner. That's good. All right, and so as far as the timing of studying, so how many, or not how many, starting studying days before you have an exam, how often do you do that? Or do you not do that?
Always.
So you always study only days before the exam?
How many days did you ask?
Just days in general?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Anybody else?
Me, I do the same. Unless something comes up.
Alrighty, and as far as getting a good night's sleep before the exam, how often do you all do that? Oh, I see some people shaking their head. So no. Okay. Alrighty, so we'll talk about that. But thank you all. It seems like we kind of got a balance of everybody and how often they achieve these things. So we'll go into that. Alrighty, so now I'm going to briefly talk about the learning styles. So the learning styles, which are visual, kinesthetic, and auditory, they're basically referring to the preferential ways that you absorb, retain, and comprehend information. So how you learn, basically. And the different learning styles depend on how you think, where you are environmentally, and how you are emotionally, as well as your experience. So how you best learned before, right? And so it's important to know that everyone's different. Not everyone has the same learning style. And in addition to not having the same learning style, not everyone has just one. You can definitely be multiple. You can have multiple learning styles, right? So you can be visual and auditory, as well as being kinesthetic and visual, or you can just be auditory. It's different. It varies from person to person. So with that in mind, what type of learning styles do you all exhibit? Where are you?
I would say for me, like visual and hands-on.
Okay.
I think I'm visual audio.
Okay, visual and audio. Anyone else?
Visual kinesthetic.
Okay. Alrighty, good. So we're going to go through them a little bit individually, and then I want to know which ones you need for certain classes that you may have. So we think about visual style studying, right? These are, like, as much as it sounds, visual. So these are the students who need to see to learn and see to remember. And so things that may help them is by sitting in front of the room. Well, I know we're on Zoom now, but sitting somewhere to avoid distractions. So whether that be your designated study space, as you all indicated that you have, sitting in a quiet room, anything to avoid distractions, as well as using visual association. So a part of you seeing it is that you can see it, you understand it, and because of that, you can retain it. So using visual association, so like flashcards, the more that you see the word, the more that you see whatever's on that flashcard, the more you're going to remember it, the more you're going to understand it. So using flashcards, graphs, I know we have a few athletes in here, so have my little X's and O's charts, however and whatever you use to remember it, that you can see it and make that connection, right? It's important. Also watching videos. So it may not be enough to just hear your professor lecture on it. You may need to see somebody work out the problems. You may need to see somebody break it down and explain it in a diagram. So watching videos, I know they have Khan Academy, you have different YouTube videos, different sources that may be helpful. So watching videos, if you haven't considered it before, I strongly suggest you using that as well as a resource. Using notepads or sticky notes. So again, having the constant seeing it, that repetition, whether you're posting it around your room, so it's a constant reminder, posting the sticky notes, the information around your room, the more you see it, the more you're going to remember it, and the better that is for you, because the more you're going to understand and retain it, right? And then lastly, using highlighters, and whether you're using different colors, whether you're using highlight, just one color, just the fact that you're using highlighters, using that visual representation, something that makes it pop out off the page at you. So, where students take 10 pages worth of notes and maybe you've highlighted about 5 of those pages, that when you're flipping through, you can easily and readily identify the information that you need to understand and retain. So using highlighters are very much helpful for visual style study. Okay. So next we have the auditory style listening. So much like visual learners, you have something that is used so that you can make that association. For auditory style learners, is hearing, right? So they need to be able to make a connection off of hearing something or understanding something that they can say multiple times to kind of gauge their repetition and gauge their understanding of the content. So for this to occur, these students need to work in quiet areas to reduce distractions, because if you're hearing a lecture, you're hearing something off a video, and then you're also hearing people talk, your mind is going to kind of go to both of those areas, and that's not going to be conducive to your learning. So they need to work in quiet areas, most helpful if you're working quietly. And then also rehearsing the information orally. So again, your auditory style learners, they need to hear it a lot. So the more that you say it, the more that you can hear it, the more it's going to be embedded in your mind, the more you're going to be able to retain it, right? So rehearsing the information orally, it's like reading your notes out loud, talking about it more. The more you repeat it, even if you have to record yourself and listen to it over and over, you need to hear the information repeated to you or orally. Also using mnemonics, rhymes, and acronyms. So these are shortened ways to help you condense a lot of information in a way that you can better understand it. So we know a mnemonic, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, if you know the order of operations, you have PEMDAS, right? You hear that and you automatically know it's associated with something else, some other type of information. And so you're able to use that, make that connection. You don't have to sit there and think about what it is, because you've already made that connection. You hear it. As soon as you hear, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, you know exactly what we're referring to. You're talking about the order of operations. So it's helpful to use rhymes and acronyms, anything that can shorten the information so you don't have to read as much and remember it that way. You can shorten it into something that you can that you can understand. Again, being that word, if you got to turn your notes into a song, however you think it may be helpful. That's usually the best method for auditory style learners, because again, you can hear it and you can comprehend it a lot better. as well as recording lectures. So I know now with regard to Zoom and how a lot of the classes are going, some of you all have classes where your professors are recording the lecture and they're available later. So for the auditory style learners, it may be helpful for you all to be attentive in class and record it. So if it's already recorded, you know, that's fine. You just listen in class, you focus on that, you focus on what the professor is saying, and you are into the lecture, and then you go back and you listen to the lecture, and then you take your notes, because for one, you've already heard it, so the information isn't new, and for two, you have the liberty of going back and hearing it as many times as you need. So you get to fast forward, play, whatever. So that's so when you're in class, it's not taken away from your attention, right? Because as an auditory style learner, it may be a little more challenging to listen and learn at the same time. So you may be able to just focus and listen to the professor, then go back and take your notes, right? And then lastly, as I mentioned before, reading your notes out loud. So again, that oral rehearsal. Okay. And then finally, we have our kinesthetic style learners. So these are typically known as the more hands-on, but it doesn't always physically mean hands-on, it's just more engaged, right? And so for the kinesthetic style learners, what's really helpful are the students who participate actively in discussions, right? And so the best way for kinesthetic style learners, if you're not physically hands-on, is getting that experience, making it relevant in some way. So again, actively participating in discussions, because guess what? Now you're getting different perspectives. Now you're getting understanding, you're getting information put into different ways, which better helps you comprehend it, right? And then, of course, obviously, we have the actual hands-on activities. So if you're like in a science class and you're doing an experiment, you learn better best by actually physically doing it, because you're learning with your hands, and it's improving your motivation and interest, right? And then also a part of participating in those discussions are teaching the material to somebody, right? Because it's been said that the greatest form of mastery is teaching. So once you're able to teach the material to somebody, you fully understand it. You can fully connect it to any experience, to any type of thought process, right? So that's super helpful for kinesthetic style learning. So I suggest, you know, if you're going through something in class and you're not sure about the information, or you feel like you got it, I encourage these students to teach their siblings, teach their peers, your parents, whoever you're, you know, with, someone who is outside of your discipline. Because once you're able to do that, now you have a different understanding of the information, a more full understanding, and they'll help you retain a lot more, right? As well as combining activities with studying. So whatever you like to do, turn it into something fun with studying, you know? So if you're like playing basketball, make a game out of your studying. That can help you. It'll gauge your interest. It'll help you improve not only your motivation, but also your memory, like you said. So it's doing the hands-on activities, right? Combining something you actually like with something that you know you have to do. And then lastly, using real life examples. So again, with the kinesthetic style learners, because we thrive, because I'm a kinesthetic style learner as well, because we thrive on hands-on activities and relevancy, that's kind of what we need. If you can make it connect to something that's relevant to me, I can easily understand it, right? So using real life examples. If you're, you know, reading your history book and you come across a situation, try to put yourself in that situation, or think about maybe when that has happened to you, or, you know, something that you can connect with. That'll make it easier for you to understand the information. Okay? So now that I've gone through the kinesthetic style learners, now that I've gone through all the learning styles, I'd like to know what styles are useful in some of the classes that you all are taking. So if I don't know what kind of classes you're taking, but maybe you tell me what classes you're taking, and then what learning style you use for that class.
I'm taking methods, which is an auditory class, really. Math, which is more kinesthetic visual, and transport, which is also kinesthetic visual.
Okay. All right. Anyone else? All right. What about Miss Mack?
I have more of a kinesthetic learning style. I like to be hands-on, so to
Okay.
get a better understanding.
And so what class might you not use that for now that you're taking?
Probably my applied human anatomy and physiology class.
Okay. Okay, good. All right, thank you. All right. And I had a video explaining, but Bloom taxonomy, but I'll just explain it for the sake of time. Okay, so now we have another resource that's useful in studying, Bloom's taxonomy. So basically, Bloom's taxonomy is used to further help students understand information, and it breaks it down into different sections so that you can create, it's like a step building process. So it doesn't require you to, I guess, how do I put it? It doesn't require you to specifically focus on one area, or excuse me, all areas at the same time. So when you're looking down when you're in your classes and you're sitting down looking at your notes, you don't have to think about remembering, understanding, and applying all of that at the same time. This process allows you to break it down into different mechanisms so that you better can understand. It takes you through different learning processes slowly, right? And so as an undergrad student, you only need to get to about the fourth step here, which is analyze, and I'll go through it, of course. But so remember, so that's the first stage, right? When you think about remembering, it's literally as simple as recalling information. So you being able to remember the information. Before you get to analyze the information, you need to remember it, right? So we're at step one. So remembering is as simple as recalling the information, memorizing it, and repeating it. So once you're able to remember the information, you've already completed the first step, and you're that much closer to being successful in your note taking and your studying skills, right? And so the second step is the understand. And so understanding, again, is explaining ideas or concepts. So being able to describe things, identify things, recognize. And it's important to know that these first two steps go hand in hand, right? So the more you are able to remember something, the more that aids in your understanding, right? So you can't really understand something that you don't remember. So when I think about like if you have a Tuesday and Thursday class, if you learn chapter 1 on Tuesday and you go home and you study your notes and you're taking more effective notes and you review it Wednesday, then by the time you get to your class on Thursday and you're going over chapter 2, you can better understand chapter 2 because you remember the information that you just learned in chapter 1. It builds on each other, right? These are the foundational building blocks. And so the third step or the third stage is applying. So using the information in new situations or being able to use whatever you just learned. And that goes anywhere from creating Quizlets for yourself, testing yourself, doing more practice problems, applying the information in real life situations. So that can go into teaching someone the material. Anything where you're showing that you actually know and understand and remember everything that you just learned is the application step. Right? So essentially using the information in a new situation, as I mentioned before, okay? And then I'll go into these in a little more detail so it'll make more sense, right? And so the final step is to analyze, which is drawing which is drawing a connection between different ideas. So out of everything you just learned, being able to differentiate and being able to understand both of them and knowing which one is applicable to whatever you're studying or whatever you're using, right? So organizing your thoughts relating to both of the concepts that you just learned, being able to ask questions, right? You understand it to a point where you can ask questions and examine. And again, distinguish, so comparing and contrasting these things. So it's the idea of you learning different concepts and being able to break it down by understanding the differences between those two. And again, I'll go into this a little more in detail. Okay. So we're talking about the remember, right? Remembering anything requires you to read it, question it, highlight it, name it, being able to connect it to anything, right? You're connecting it to your memory. You're remembering. You're taking information, looking at it multiple times, and committing it to memory, essentially. So an example of that, if I was a professor and I had a lecture, at the end of my lesson plan, my goal would be at the end of this lesson, the student will be able to identify and name all the 50 states. So you being able to remember all 50 states is imperative to the lesson, because you can read the states, question it. It's not about you defining it, but you can remember. It's something that you can remember, right? And so as far as studying tips that can help you remember, for one, taking efficient notes, right? So not just copying everything down in the book or every single thing that your professor's saying, what you know that you can remember and what you deem as important, right? As well as rereading the class material. So it's not enough to just read the chapters that were assigned. You need to read them multiple times, not just after, because you have a homework assignment. You need to read them preferably before class, or if it helps you to get more done after class, after you can ask your questions, reading it after class. But it's important that you don't just read it one time. You constantly read it because you want to commit it to memory, right? Because that's how we commit things to memory. Practice. We look at things over and over, as well as highlighting key words. So with highlighting key words, it can better help you make those connections so that you can remember, because you're able to have it connect to something. And that's creating a new thought, right? Generating a new memory, as well as using flashcards. So that just helps with the repetition. The more you see it, the more you understand it and remember it. And then lastly, reviewing it. So not just looking at your notes the day before you have an exam or 2 days before you have an exam, but maybe reviewing it enough time to where you're like, okay, I understand it now, but now I can ask this question, and now this answer makes sense, looking at it multiple times, not just for a little bit. So the second one, as I mentioned again, understanding. And so when you're understanding, you're able to explain things, discuss it, right? You don't really understand something if you can't have a conversation about it, if you can't discuss what's going on, summarizing it, right? Recognizing the information in itself. If I talk to you about World War II, because that's a lecture that we learned, and you don't understand it, you're not going to be able to contribute much to that conversation, because you haven't got to the second step. You don't understand. You don't even recognize it, right? So being able to at least recognize it, contrast, identify, things like that. And so some study tips that will help you better understand your information is, again, reading and reviewing the course material. So I hope you all are seeing that this is a common factor. You need to read, reread, and review the course material, right? Not enough to just look at your notes one time, right? And then explaining the material to a friend. So again, for my kinesthetic learners, and then other learning styles in general, the more you understand it, the more you're able to easily explain it to someone else. And that may even invoke new understanding in you. You might even have a new thought after explaining it. So explaining it to a sibling, a friend, or what have you, that's outside of your discipline, because that really shows that you now have an understanding. You now can explain, you understand the material, right? Simplifying your notes. So I mentioned before, you don't need to take a bunch of time you don't need to rewrite the book, basically. That's why you have the book. You're simplifying, you're shortening it. So you're pulling out the key components. Whatever, if you hear your professor say one word multiple times, maybe write that down, right? You're not writing down and recording every single thing, as well as making connections. So a way you can understand, which will also help you to remember, is making that connection between the two, or between the concepts or whatever it is you're learning, right? And then lastly, listen to YouTube scholars and podcasts. So maybe if you don't understand something, it might help if somebody else breaks it down. The same way that you explain the material to a friend teaching it, it may help if it's explained to you and taught to you in a different way, because now you get a different perspective and you're able to use that to make a connection with the material so that you can better understand it, right? And so now we have apply. So when you apply, if you're talking about math, you're able to calculate, right? You can do the problems. You can illustrate, solving, relate the material. So again, anything that has to do with you applying the information, not to use the word in the definition of the word, but you executing that, right? Showing what it is that you know, showing that you know what it is you're learning, right? And so some tips for that, again, if you're talking about math, doing some practice problems, or as I mentioned before, you hear me saying, teaching the material, become the teacher. So show exactly what you know. You have an understanding of the material, teach it to somebody, you'll get that foundation that you need to better understand and be able to recite the information that it is you're learning. And so creating your own examples, right? So maybe you only know the material because of the way that your professor has laid out the examples and connection. But in order for you to fully get that understanding and be able to apply it, maybe come up with your own examples, your own questions, your own practice problems, make your own study guide, you know what I'm saying? And quiz yourself. That's really important. That's really how you show that you know the information. So again, with the flashcards, quizzing yourself, just showing yourself that you actually know this information, you can apply it, and that will better serve you for when you're taking the exam, or even just engaging with conversation and lectures in the class, because now you're challenging yourself. And not only do you know that you understand the information, but you can show other people that you know. You can essentially teach it, right? Recreate the information. And then so lastly, we have analyze, right? Being able to classify, simplify, examine, compare and contrast information. And some study tips that will help with that is breaking down the information. So that's essentially what you do when you analyze, you break down, right? And so if you have a chapter 1, maybe in studying, you break down the key components of the chapter. So if there are subheadings, highlight the subheadings and then take notes on those. So breaking it down, not just taking it for one, like, okay, chapter 1 going straight through is 20 pages. Breaking it down into different subsections so that it's easier to access the information, it's easier to remember and connect with the information, as well as categorizing the material. So putting it, again, like I mentioned, breaking it down and putting it into different sections. So if you have to study chapters 1 through 4, if you're categorizing the material, it may help, instead of having chapter 1 and then chapter 3 and then mixing your notes that way, having chapter 1 and then highlighting the subheadings. Okay, so when you go to your notes, okay, this is chapter 1, and I can break down these notes in this in this chapter, and then maybe a different color or a different page, you have chapter 2, and you kind of break down the information that way. But just categorizing the material, having it organized so it's readily identifiable, and so that you can easily understand it and connect it, right? And then identifying evidence that supports generalization. So if you're learning something and you're like, okay, I learned this in class and this makes sense, so maybe applying that or thinking about how that relates to you and your life situations, and making that connection, right? Finding that evidence to support it. Okay, so does anyone have any questions about the Bloom's taxonomy thus far? Have you all used Bloom's taxonomy before? I should have started with that question. Has anyone used it before? I do see that there are people in the chat, but I can't see the chat because of my screen.
Yes, I have. This is Monique Kelis,
Okay.
Writing Center. So we do.
Okay. Right. Alrighty. Anyone else? Okay. Alrighty. So now I'm just going to share a few tips with you all for taking online classes. I know with Zoom it's been a lot, well, maybe not a lot more, but there have been a lot of challenges, especially if you're not on campus, right? So let me start by asking, how many of you are taking classes on campus? Nobody. So everybody's on Zoom. Okay. And for the students who are on Zoom, how many classes do you all have currently?
5.
5. Okay, what about Miss Jones? How many classes do you have?
7.
7. Oh, okay. All right, so the workload is pretty tough, right? And as far as the and let me ask this again. I'm sorry. How many of you are freshmen? Are there any freshmen? Okay, no freshmen. What about sophomores?
I'm a freshman.
Okay.
Oh Lord, I'm a freshman.
Okay. So got freshmen. Any sophomores?
I'm a sophomore.
Okay. So we have a little mix of both, but I was gonna say it's really tough for your first semester and your first year to be on campus. Online, right? It's really tough. So just have a few tips that may be helpful in taking online classes that you all can maybe use to better the process and make it a lot more smoother, right? So the first thing you want to do is set goals and check in with yourself every week. So I'm not sure what your all schedules are looking like. I don't know if you do work and study every single day, but it is important for you to set little goals so you can kind of make it to the milestones, the big things. So if you're using your planner, which really that should have been the first thing, using your planner. But when you're setting your goals, maybe if you have an assignment due in 2 weeks, maybe setting aside some time to work on it each day, or if you know that you work best at a specific time of day, and you can dedicate that time, during the day to that, making a plan for yourself, knowing that you won't just do all of the work the day before or the day of, giving yourself that time, set little goals. So if you're like, okay, today I'm gonna work on the assignment a little bit, and I'm gonna do my homework that's due today, and I'm gonna take a self-care day, do something that's self-care, right? Setting goals at the end of the week. Did you accomplish that? On Tuesday, when you said that you were gonna work on the assignment little by little, did you do that? Having a little check mark, right? So setting goals. And then it makes you feel better. It makes you feel like you got a lot done, right? And then next, using your planner, as I said, with, taking a lot of classes and then it being online, it's not, your professors aren't as easily accessible as they were on campus. So it's not like they can remind you in class, don't forget, you got that assignment due tonight. Everything is pretty much on Canvas and they have the due dates next to them. So having a planner right now is probably, more needed than ever. So keeping up with the dates, keeping up with your assignments, different classes, right? Use your planner. That's what it's promise is there to help you. It's not going to hurt you at all. Using your planner, right? And then practicing good time management. So not waiting until the last minute to do things if you know that you're not an effective procrastinator, right? Using that time. If you know that you got a few moments out the day to work on something a little extra, take that time, right? Set time for yourself. If you think that it's going to take you 30 minutes to do an assignment, but you give yourself a whole hour and a half, focus that time. So it only takes you 30 minutes. And when you complete it in 30 minutes, think about what you can be doing for that next hour, right? And don't procrastinate. So again, we're not waiting to the last minute to do our assignments, study for our exams. We're creating a space so that we're able to get everything done effectively and in an efficiently timed manner. And then, as I mentioned before, creating a designated study space. So it's not going to be very helpful if you're studying and you have your friends talking to you and your siblings are running around. You have the TV in front of you. You need to find somewhere where you can study, where you can focus and you can find that peace of mind, that peace of quiet, so that you can actually put forth that work and that effort in your work, as well as eliminating distractions. So I know for a fact, for me at least, number one distraction is my phone, right? So I know sometimes I physically have to throw it across the room because too many notifications at one time and my mind immediately goes every time. So eliminating that distraction. I'm not multifaceted in that I can study and watch TV at the same time. I tried it, doesn't work. So I need to eliminate that distraction. So whatever it is that isn't going to be helpful or conducive to your study environment, you need to get rid of it, right? figuring out how you learn best. So this goes to, if you know you're not a morning person, when you're setting your goals for yourself, there's no point of you saying that you're going to study at 6 in the morning, because you know that's not true. And what's important is you knowing your truth. So if you know that you learn best in the mid-afternoon, so you're like, around 3, that's when I get my juices flowing, that's when I have it, then you need to set up your time so that you're studying around 3 and you're doing your work around 3, right? You don't want to be too tired in the morning because you're not a morning person. You don't want to be up late at night and doing the work when you're not a late at night person, figuring out when you work best throughout the day, what time of day you working best, right? And then lastly, contacting your professors for help. So again, I know with everything being on Zoom, it's a little less, your professors may seem a little less accessible, but reaching out to them as soon as, still, just like you were on campus, reaching out to them as soon as you're having trouble in the class, as soon as you need their attention, reaching out to them, following up with them, and just making sure that you're getting the help that you need. And again, that's why you have tutors as well. We're here 100% to help you, get you through your classes. We want you to win. We want you to succeed, right? And then in addition to contacting your professors, we also have a few resources that you can reach out to if your professors are not as responsive. So I'll get into that in just 1 second. But does anyone else have any other tips, anything that's been helping them, getting them through taking these classes on Zoom? Maybe your peers can benefit from that.
Yeah, for the getting rid of your distractions, I use this app called Forest, which kind of locks your phone. It gives you the option to plant a seed, and that seed grows into a forest, and it blocks you out from doing anything else on your phone. And if you need to do something, it chops down your forest, and it makes you feel bad. So,
Okay, that's interesting.
What is it called again?
Forest.
Maybe you put it in the chat, Monzo.
Yeah, but that's just the name.
Forest, okay.
Okay.
All right. What about other students? What have you been doing to help you stay afloat in your online classes? All right. So, Miss Worthy, what about you?
I go to study hall every morning, every day, and I kind of just stay there when I have classes and everything. And it just makes me feel like I'm in a school setting, so it helps a lot.
Okay. Creating that environment for yourself. That's good. That designated study space. Alrighty. Anyone else want to share some tips that they think may be helpful for online taking classes?
Put on real clothes, like you're actually going somewhere. I found that helped me for work. I don't take class, but I found getting dressed like I'm working helps me work instead of just laying back down on the couch.
Okay. Okay, good.
You know what, Zoe? That's one of the recommendations that a lot of corporations who now or who prior to COVID had people who work from home. They strongly suggested that they got out of their night clothes or whatever and put on something that made them a polo shirt, even if they had on shorts, a polo shirt or something, or even put on a shirt and tie to make them feel like they're actually at work so they could be productive and work. So that kind of does work.
Yeah, for me, it's the shoes. If I have shoes on, I must be working on something because I don't wear those in the house.
Oh, you committed. You have the whole outfit. Okay.
Interesting.
Very okay. So this is just a few resources we have. If you all have not yet scheduled an appointment on Simplicity, this is how we do it. So you go to famuinsight.simplicity.com, right? And then you use your iRattler information. So your first name, last name, not your email. So the actual, just your first name, last name, and then whatever your password is, right? And when you go in, you choose tutorial appointments because they also have advising on Simplicity. You chose tutorial appointments. You click the new tutoring request. You pick your subject, your tutor, whatever time and day works best for you. And then once you do that, you get a confirmation email. And then your tutor will send you a link to the Zoom meeting, right? So if you have any questions with that, I'll put my email in the chat. But if you have any questions with that on how to set up an appointment, it's right here. You can take a picture. I can make this available, whatever is best for you all, right? And then also we have our academic coaches as well as some of the coordinators. So when I was mentioning not being able to access or get in touch with your professors, you can reach out to Mr. Simmons. His email is right here. He's also on this call if you have a few questions. And I assure you, he can find somebody to get in touch with your professors so that you can get your questions answered and you can get the help that you need, right? And then also your academic coaches. So the email is right there as well. If you're having trouble in the class or again with the professor, you can reach out. And the bottom line is there is somebody here to help you, right? So we don't want anyone suffering in silence, and we certainly don't want anyone waiting until the last minute to get help. We're right here. You know, tutors are here. We're available on different social platforms, Instagram, Twitter, whatever. Reach out to us, please. Somebody, don't suffer in silence is essentially what the takeaway here is. But outside of that, I just want to thank you all for being attentive and coming to this workshop. I do hope it was helpful. And again, I'll put my email in the chat. If you all have any questions, please do not hesitate. Thank you all. Does anyone have any